You once said that you like to make an audience scream through technical means. What is it about an audience screaming that you like?
How many times have you heard a woman say, "Oh, I went to see the movie and had a good cry"?
That's true.
They do, you see. Now, what is a good cry? She never says, "I went there and had a bad cry." Otherwise, she wouldn't have paid the money to go in the first place. So these people have paid money to be scared, just as much as they go to Disneyland and go on the Big Dip or whatever they call that railway, you know.
The roller coaster?
Yes, roller coaster, or the haunted house. They pay to be scared.
Do you like to be scared yourself?
No, I'm not keen about it. I have been on odd occasions.
Like when?
Oh, I think I was driving with my wife to Dubrovnik in the middle of the night, and we were on a ledge, on a mountain ledge, 8,000 feet up, and we came head to head on with a bus. So it was a question who was going to go by first, and I remember having to get out and beckon her on, and the wheel was within 18 inches of the drop. I said, this may be good enough for the movies, but it's not good enough for me now.
I know that you plot out very carefully your scenario and work out very carefully your films. Does it ever happen then that the actors get in the way of this, that you have trouble with them?
Method actors do.
You do?
Well, method actors are like children. They're all right for the theater. But they're a little problem with films, especially where cutting is involved. If you remember a film I made years ago called Rear Window, which was all from the point of view of one man, James Stewart, sitting in a window. Well, he had to look. Then I had to cut to what he saw, then cut back to his reaction. Now, what I was really doing was showing a mental process of the man by means of pictures, by what he saw. And supposing he said, well, I don't feel I would look that way. Well, how can the film be constructed on those lines? I had it with that actor who's now dead, called Montgomery Clift. He was a method actor.
And you had difficulty with him?
Well, yes, I was shooting a scene in Quebec, and he was playing the part of a priest who'd just been acquitted of a murder, but was being sort of booed and stoned outside the courthouse. And then the action of the film was to go across the street into the Chateau Frontenac Hotel, which you've seen pictures of and so forth, probably in there. Well, I wanted him to look up to the crowd and up to the people leaning out of the window. But I also had put on the facade of the building the big gold letters of the word hotel, so the audience would know where they were going, into a hotel. And he said, I don't think I would look up. I said, well, you better look up or else.
What about somebody like Orson Welles or Charles Lawton?
Well, Charlie Lawton was a problem. You know, when I made that film Jamaica Inn, it took a whole morning to get one close-up. He was a nice man, a charming man, he really was. But he suffered so much because, you know, he felt he couldn't get it out. And we were a whole morning on the one close-up until he got up and he was crying in the corner. And I went over, sort of patted him on the shoulder. He looked up at me and said, aren't you and I a couple of babies? And I wanted to say, me? I mean, I wanted to use a Goldwyn-ism and say, include me out, you know. So finally he came back and did it, you see. He said, all right. I said, yes, Charles, fine. It wasn't all that different from the other close-ups, you see. Then he took me aside and put his arm around my shoulder and said, you know how I got it, don't you? I said, no, Charles. How? He said, I thought of myself as a small boy of 10 wetting my knickers. Oh, really? Absolutely true, really. You'd be astonished.
Do you think there's something like a Hitchcockian actor, if that's a word, a type that is perfect for your films?
I don't really think so. There are many, many types in the film Frenzy. There are all kinds of leading people from the London theatre. I used to say years ago, I don't today because he's gone, Charles is gone, but I used to say the hardest things to photograph are dogs, babies, motorboats, and Charlie Lawton. Motorboats, because they never come back for take two. Everybody's gesticulating and so forth, and the boat's calmly going on out to sea somewhere.
You've used, though, a series of, I guess, what could be described as cool blondes. Grace Kelly, Tippi Hedren, Madeleine Kahn.
That wasn't really by design. It was really to avoid the obvious, voluptuous, sexy blonde.
Speaking of sexiness, you deal a lot with sexual aberrations and fetishes as subject matter. You feel this is a good subject matter for suspense?
Well, suspense it doesn't relate really to that.
Then why would you use these?
Suspense relates entirely to causing an audience to go through emotions and can only be arrived at by giving them knowledge. Most people get confused between the mystery story and the thriller and the suspense story and the whodunit. See,
well,
the whodunit, oh, there's a big difference. The whodunit, you see, is a intellectual exercise like a crossword puzzle. When you buy a whodunit, you're terribly tempted to look at that last page, and you don't because you feel you've wasted your money or be disappointed. But the suspense story is giving the audience full information before you start. In other words, there is a bomb under these seats. Tell the audience that, and they will scream out and say, get out of there, get out of there.
How about in Notorious? Could you describe the build-up of suspense there?
Well, no, that wasn't really... The suspense there was, how soon will Claude Rains find out that the woman who was the daughter of an old friend is an American agent? We all know it. We were told at the beginning that she was working with Cary Grant. Then you had the added fact that Cary Grant was in love with her. And yet in the course of his job, he literally had to put this woman into the arms of another man. Now that was your emotional story, but your suspense story, which built up to its climax, when they just then, in the process of which you come to the moment when it says, "Mother, I'm married to an American agent." Now they know they've got to get rid of her, but they've got to get rid of her surreptitiously. Can't just bump her off, because all the rest of his colleagues will know. So you get a case of arsenical poisoning, you see.
Who is your idea of an ideal villain? I've heard you read somewhere that you thought that Claude Rains kind of personified the ideal.
Well, he was a nice man in his way, you know. I think any man, as you know, as you've seen the film Frenzy, you've got a cheerful, lively man who is a psychotic. You see, unless they're pleasant and acceptable, their victims would never go near them. Most people misunderstand what a villain is. He's a charming man who kills women. But if he didn't have the charm, they'd run a mile from him.